So tonight, presentation is going to be from Karen Holliday, who is ASCA's field trip coordinator, but also Karen is retired from the Arkansas Bureau of Legislative Research at the state capitol, where she worked for 23 years. And before that, she was director of the Lawrence County Library System in Walnut Ridge, Arkansas. And when she moved to from Walnut Ridge to Little Rock, she joined ASCA and has participated in many activities since. And she meets many birders and has encouraged them, myself included, into getting into birding, because that's how she started with us. And she's traveled to 7 continents and over 50 countries, many of them for birding trips. And we're going to hear about an exciting one tonight, Guyana, South America, which was a new trip for Karen and her co-travelers. And they got to see some really cool stuff that we're going to get to see, I'm sure, and hear about tonight. So, Karen, do you want to take it away?
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
Yep.
Yes, this was a new country for all of us. Shane Woolbright and Art Evans and I have been birding internationally together for years. And Shane sent me an email. He said he was putting together a trip to Guyana in South America. And I went, Guyana? And not even on my radar for a birding trip. And so I emailed him back and I said, Shane, you have over 7,000 birds on your life list. Are you even going to be able to get any new birds by going to Guyana? And he said, yeah, actually, he said, I'm going to be able to pick up quite a few new birds. And I went, well, okay, if you're going to get new birds, then I'll definitely get new birds. So we signed up and uh, Art's nephew, he's 16 years old, Ewan Martin, and he joined us also for the trip. And we flew into Georgetown and birded around there for a couple of days. And then we followed the what's called the Old Cattle Trail Road all the way south down to the southern part of Guyana to the Savannah area and then over to Lethem, where we flew back 2 weeks later to Georgetown and then home. And we saw quite a variety of habitats. We followed the Essequibo River quite a bit throughout the trip, got really close to Brazil 2 or 3 times, and saw a lot of great birds and had a good time. In Georgetown, we stayed in the Status Hotel, very nice hotel in Georgetown. Georgetown is huge. It's all spread out like 25 miles and heavily populated and a lot of traffic. But the hotel was on a little canal here. And so we had a kind of a free afternoon when we got there and did a little bit of birding just from the patio. And the best thing was the snail kite that was sitting on one of the wires, looking for snails in the canal. And like I said, a lot of traffic in Georgetown and almost no stoplights or stop signs, but nobody crashed. I don't know how they managed that. And we had some street vendors going around. And then our first full day, that morning, they took us out to the farmland area, which is big open fields and some marshy areas and a river. And we got in a wooden boat with the local guide, and we went on out to the river channel, the main river channel, and just started birding along the river. And the bushes on the right here, they were full of Watsons. And that's my favorite bird. They're goofy looking, they're clumsy, they're noisy, they're just a mess. And they're so fun to look at. And kind of something I did a little bit of research about them. And I knew that they were in a family all of their own because they're just so unique. But I didn't know that it was the national bird of Guyana. So right off the bat, we got to see the Hoatzin, and I've seen them in other countries, and they're just crazy. And they're also known as, their nickname is the stink bird. And this is another thing I didn't know, was that they eat primarily leaves. And so they have a digestive fermentation system that's very similar to a cow. And it produces a lot of gas, so they burp a lot. And that's what, so the burps are the smell, the bad smell. But it's a really interesting bird. Other birds that we saw along the river were the striated heron, black cobia perched up really nicely for us. We heard and saw the howler monkeys. We actually got very, very close in the boat to the Guyana red howler monkey. And they're a big monkey and pretty fierce looking. We were glad we were out in the river. And then the next day, we went out to the mudflats. Georgetown is on the Atlantic Ocean. And so they took us out to the mudflats to bird while the tide was out. And all along this kind of darkish area was hundreds of egrets and ibises. And the best treat was the scarlet ibis. And Art had a brand new camera and he was excited. He was trying it out, had a really good long lens on it. So he was able to get a couple different pictures of the scarlet ibis, and that is a gorgeous bird. And another bird that got pretty close to us that we could see was the little blue heron, and it's the only all dark heron in Guyana. And then in the afternoon, they took us to Georgetown Botanical Gardens, which is a huge park and lots of great habitat. And it was crawling with limpkins. There were limpkins everywhere. And we got really close to them. They're very tame. And the crazy thing was we saw one up in the trees, as perched in a tree, and we were going, that's a ground dwelling bird. What's he doing up there? Also, there were several parrots and in the park and a lot of trees, so there was plenty of cavities. And this is the orange-winged parrot and its nesting cavity. So, like I said, similar to the mudflats, there were quite a few egrets in the gardens, and they were in beautiful breeding plumage with those long feathers. We also saw another striated heron out in the open, so we got to see him really well. And then several red-capped cardinals were working the grassy area, catching bugs, and they were fun to watch. We also saw a lineated woodpecker and got a couple of good shots of it near its nest cavity. And it was getting late in the afternoon and the sun was starting to go down when we spotted the blue and yellow macaws. And because of the late sun, the front of the macaws, which is normally yellow, in this photograph ended up being a little bit orange color, but it's a really bright, colorful orange and blue macaw, and they're big and they're noisy. So then we started down the road. This is the only road that runs all the way down to the southern tip of Guyana. And it is, we left Georgetown and pretty quickly got on the dirt part of it. So we spent quite a while traveling, and one of us asked Neil, our guide, our permanent guide that was with us the whole time, when, was this construction and would we get back on pavement? And he said, the next time you're going to see pavement, he said, we'll be at the end of the trip in Lethem. So the road is completely dirt all the way down the country. Our first stop, once we started down the road, was the ferry at the Esquimalt River. We were taking a metal john boat over to Michelle Island, and that's where we spent a couple of nights there. It was really nice accommodation. The little bungalows were very comfortable. Screens and mosquito netting to help with the bugs. And at the end of the island, was the rapids at one spot in the river. And out in the middle of the rapids was a couple of big rocks, and you can kind of see it out there. And it was full of neotropic cormorants sitting on it, on the rocks. Then this is the biggie. We were in our John boat, and he took us away from the falls, and we started skirting, motoring along the bank of the river, looking for shorebirds and whatever else we could find. And up ahead was a huge tree, and I noticed there was what looked like a really big bird, kind of thrashing around up in the tree, and I pointed it out to Neil. I said, "What is that?" I said, "That bird's huge." And he looked and he said, "Oh my gosh," he said, "that's a harpy eagle." And we could not believe it. We got the harpy right off the bat on the trip. And we were so excited. And the pictures, I've got couples of pictures are also video, but the pictures were bad because not only were we in a rocking boat, but the wind was pretty good and it was waving the branches around, and the bird was kind of going back and forth. And this is another picture of him, and he's huge. He's most things that I read about it said it's the largest eagle in the world. And this is a little bit better look. You can see his face and you can see his crown. It's not playing. The video's not playing. What do you mean? Okay. Oh, there we go. I didn't push hard enough. You can see the wind, and we were trying to be very quiet and still in the boat because we didn't want to spook him. And so he actually stayed for a few minutes looking at us and, deciding that we were okay. Hit it again. Okay. You can see his crown feathers being blown around. It's a gorgeous bird. Really handsome bird. Oh, then he left. We were so excited. We couldn't believe we'd gotten our target bird right off the bat. So we continued on down the dirt road. That's where we traveled every day, was down the road. It's so remote, most of the stretch. That all the vans had tours of gasoline because there aren't any gas stations to speak of. They also carry a spare tire. In fact, our van driver said he carries 2 spare tires because there's no way if you had a problem that you could get a tow truck out into these remote areas. And as we drive, every once in a while, we would stop, and Neil would get us out, and we'd walk along the road and do some birding. And we stopped because I really like snakes, and so there was a dead one in the road, so we all got out and looked at it, and it was squished, but not bad enough that we couldn't identify it. And it was an Amazon coach whip, and that thing was about 6 feet long. It was a really long snake and not venomous. And then at another stop, we got out and there were some paw prints in the dust, in the dirt. And at these big paw prints, Neil came over and got us. We were looking at a bird, and he said, "You need to come over here." And he said, "These are jaguar prints." And we went, "Oh my." And he said, "These haven't been run over by any vehicle, so probably through here fairly recently." And we went, "Oh, let's stick close to the van." And I had Ewan put his hand down so you could get an idea of just how big the paw print was. Our next lodge was the at a rainforest lodge, and it has a canopy walkway. And we stayed there, and you can see what the dirt road, the red dirt road, did to our van. And pretty grimy. And then a nice couple pulled up not too long after we got there, and their Jeep was even more muddy and dusty and dirty than our van. And I liked the sign because it has a macaw on it and a harpy eagle and a howler monkey. And the rooms were really nice, mosquito netting and an outdoor private shower for each room with no roof over it. So you could take a shower and look up in the trees and bird watch while you were showering. And this was our official greeter. There was about a group of about 6 or 7 curassows that ran all over the property. And he came right up, wanted to look at us and see, because I guess we were new to him. And he let us take his picture. He was very friendly, and he's big. They're big. So then we did, the next day we did a canopy walkway, and it was all hung chained bridges over to the different towers. And so we walked from tower to tower and looking for birds, monkeys, whatever we could see. It was kind of slow. We just really didn't see much in the way of either birds or animals. We were really high up. I mean, really high. And looking out over the jungle, the forested area. And then we walked back down from the canopy walkway back down the mountain. And as we were going down, we spotted a red-necked woodpecker poking its head out of a nest cavity. And then we also, at another spot, spotted a lineated woodpecker in its nest cavity. And the lineated woodpecker was feeding a juvenile, and he would poke his head out, and here'd come mom or dad with food. We nun birds, the black nun bird. At one spot in the walkway, we saw this huge scorpion, and it's an Amazonian black scorpion, and it's really fierce looking too, and big. So we kind of gave it a wide berth. We also saw, as we moved further down the road, going to another location, Neil spotted a golden-handed tamarin, and it's a really interesting looking animal. It's black, all black, except for all 4 paws on it are yellow, and that's where it gets the golden-handed part of its nail, and it has a super long tail like an opossum. And this is another stop to get out and go follow one of the trails. And we were walking through it, and the trails are barely marked. I mean, it's just, there's no real paths, paved paths or even cleared paths. It's just kind of a little walk through, you just kind of walk through the jungle. And you had to be really careful as you were walking these trails, because the trees are, some of them are they've protected themselves by growing like big spines. The tree on the left had great big spines sticking out of it. Another tree that we saw had these big knobby thorns on it. So those were really interesting looking. But like I said, you didn't reach out and grab something unless you looked first. And the trees were also huge. This is Shane standing by one of the big trees. And then I had Ewan go stand at the base of the trunk of a huge fig tree. And you can see just how big it is. And then got a shot of Art and I looking up into the canopy of these giant trees. And Neil, this is our guide that was with us the whole time. He would be constantly scanning the forest, looking for birds and animals and things like that, any kind of critters. And we learned very quickly to run, pretty much get out of the way. If there were any spider monkeys around, they hated having humans in their territory. and they literally would start bombarding us with branches and twigs and pieces of wood. And so we were at one place, we were walking one of the trails, and we didn't hear them. We didn't realize they were there until we got right underneath them. And all of a sudden, these big branches started flying down at us, and we looked up and saw the spider monkeys, and we literally had to run because they were throwing everything they could at us. This is another trail we walked up the mountain to get to this rock formation, because this was where Neil had staked out a Guyanan cock of the rock, and the female had built her mud nest up under that rock shelf and was sitting on the nest. You can see her there with her red eye rings, and it was a little mud and grass nest. And Neil is just a drop dead gorgeous orange, bright orange, and he was outside the rock overhang, and we never could get him to come out and see him clearly, but it's hard to miss that orange, that bright orange. Then they fed us breakfast along the river, and we got in another boat, John boat, because we're on a different stretch of the river at this point. And we motored along the riverbank looking for whatever we could. And of course, the water birds, the rufescent tiger heron, and this is a juvenile. Kingfishers, the Amazon kingfishers, were pretty plentiful. We've had one jabiru, and it's in the stork family, and it is huge. It is like almost 9 feet tall. It's 7 to 8, 9 feet tall, something like that. It is a really tall, big bird. And so we were excited to see it. And then we saw several green ibises along the riverbank. And this is a great black hawk. We saw those off and on anytime there was some water. They liked hunting frogs and fish and things like that. And then we get down towards the middle part of Guyana to the Sururama area, excuse me, and had a really nice lodge there also. And the big excitement was somebody came running up to the general hangout area where we were and said, there's a huge boa, a huge snake down by the fence. And of course we had to go look, and it was a red-tailed boa constrictor, big snake, and gorgeous red tail, which is what gives it its name. And very thick too. It was really thick. And there's the whole snake front to back. That was fun to see. He wasn't the least bit concerned about us. He finally slithered off into the field. We wondered if he was hunting Crestodora pendula chicks, because there were a bunch of pendula nests. You can see them on the right there. And we figured he was just waiting underneath those nests to see if any chicks fell out. And then over in another open area, this is a common putu, and he was sitting on the top of a dead stob, and he really blended in. Neil spotted him, and so we walked over towards him, and he never moved because he figured he was perfectly camouflaged, and he just ignored us completely. And this is their favorite way to perch, is making it look like it's a branch or the tree, part of the tree. Another bird was the pearl kites, and these are the smallest raptors in the country, and they're just sweet little pretty hawks. Neil also spotted over on another tree the band-tailed nighthawk, and he was sleeping because they're nocturnal, and so they sleep during the day. And I thought this was an interesting sign, because the trucks, and especially the log trucks, went really fast down the road. And it says speed is a 5-letter word, and so is death. Slow is a 4-letter word, and so is life. So I thought that was really kind of a nice way to say, hey, slow down. Because there were a lot of the locals walked the road, going back and forth between villages and stuff. And this lady at one of the lodges that we stayed at, she was quite the entrepreneur. She had a little store that she ran, and she had everything from some clothing to drinks, coffee, tea, beer, uh, candy, things like that. And she also had a kind of a gazebo, and I asked about it, and it turns out that the long haul truckers, the timber, especially the timber truckers, she rented out hammocks and sleeping bags, and so the truckers could pull in there, rent a sleeping bag and a hammock, and hang the hammock in the covered um, area, and so that was another way for her to raise money, because again, we were so remote, there weren't hotels and things like that, and the lodges were too expensive for the truckers. And you can see the sleeping bags and the hammocks there under the roof. The local ladies, each time we moved to a different location, each day different local ladies would bring us the foods, lunch, and sometimes even dinner. And oh my goodness, they can cook. They are really good cooks, and huge portions too. Half the time I gave half my food to Ewan, because it was just a lot of food. And a lot of times they made fresh juice from the fruits, and that was real. They were really good drinks. And we noticed at this kind of uh, pagoda, for a roadside pagoda, somebody in our group looked up and said, "Oh my gosh, there's bats up there in the ceiling." And so we got all excited about that. They weren't very big; they were small, and they didn't mind us at all. And I'm pretty sure that he told us that they were proboscis bats, and they have a big nose. And here's one up that Art was able to get with his telephoto lens. Cute little bat, actually. Then we got up into more of the mountainous area, because the other big target bird for this trip were the sun parakeets, and this is their habitat. And we picked up a local guide that knew where they hang out, and he rode with us, and we found the sun parakeets, or conures. Some books, field trips, field guides call them conures, and really pretty birds with the orange and the green and the yellow. And we got really lucky that they were right on the side of the road in some bushes. Normally, our local guide told us that they perch a lot higher. And so we were excited to see them down low and admire just how gorgeous they were. And then 5 minutes after we see them, here comes a big giant and flushed them, and they were gone, and they never came back. But at least we got to see them for a few minutes. And Art is a big orchid and lily person. He's big into those. And so we, as we were driving along, there was a big field of lilies. And of course, Art had to get out. He wanted to get out and go look at them. So he and Shane went and looked at them, and Art took pictures in case he might be able to identify it later. And this is what it looked like. It's kind of a double bloom lily. And this is another trail that we walked, because we were, like I said, we were close to the mountains, and it was bizarre. These huge boulders in the middle of the jungle were scattered around this area. And the only thing we could figure out is maybe one of the volcanoes, hundreds of years ago, spewed out the big boulders in an eruption, and that's where they came from, because they were just scattered just a little bit here and there, and they're giant. I mean, just huge rocks. And of course, Ewan had to go climb one. And so he got up there on top and took a picture of him sitting up there. He was pretty pleased with himself. And then Art was busy taking pictures of the rocks in the stream bed. And because again, we were all fascinated with these huge boulders. And Ewan found another boulder, so he climbed on top of that one and sat for a minute looking around. And then he decided to go, we got down to the end of the trail, and he decided to go down to the stream. And he wanted to see what this brown, weird thing that was stuck on the side of the big boulder. And we thought it was probably a termite nest, maybe. And so he walked over to it and was able to reach up, and he started tapping on it. And it turns out they were not termites, they were bees. And they came flying out of there mad and went after Ewan, and he was able to get away from them, thank goodness. And once we were away from him and safe, he has really thick hair and fairly long and curly. And I had to pick bees out of his hair and squish them because they were in his hair and biting him or stinging him, whatever. I don't know, but it was hurting. And so we managed to get all the bees out of his hair. And at this point now, we're, at least halfway down the country. And you can see where the Surarama area is. And we're then headed down to, again, along the Essequibo River, down to the Rupununi, I think that's how you say it, Savannah area. And they have tapirs down there, and a lot of people hunt for sustained substance too. A lot of them eat what they can hunt. The villagers, the locals, and the savannahs were really flat. And most of the time there was either no road or just a dirt track, but our local guides driving their vehicles knew their way around that. I would have been lost, but they just took us around, and we had a great couple of days. There were a lot of burrowing owls in that area, and they're always so fun to see, and they're so tiny and cute. We figured this was probably a mated pair because they just stood there together and watched us drive slowly by. And then here's another one that sat still for his picture. And they're just as cute as they can be, little tiny things. Also saw red-breasted meadowlarks, very colorful with that red breast and black back. We found a little small covey of crested bobwhites, another really colorful bird with all the white spots and the rufous on the neck and the head. Southern lapwings were pretty common. They're all over South America. I've seen them in lots of different countries, but I still like them. I think they're pretty. And this is a yellowish pipit, which is kind of rare. And that was our first and only pipit that we saw on the trip. And caracaras are around all over the savanna areas hunting. It's another big raptor and big bill on it. And I was so excited. The one critter that I wanted to see was the giant anteater. And we saw them in 2 or 3 different places, but we weren't able to get any kind of a really good photo of them because they were down in the grass and kind of far away. But they're huge. They're like the size of a small couch. I was so surprised how big they were. But they're like I said, we saw them 2 or 3 different times in different areas. We also, the Savannah area also had marshy areas. And, with a dry savanna, water attracts a lot of birds. So we birded the marshy areas as much as we could, had time to do, because there were always birds. And this is where we're searching for birds, scanning for birds along one of the marshes. And we were that I don't remember what all we saw right at that particular moment, but while we were standing there, a real pretty dragonfly came by, and the other bird that is the other couple birds that are there around marshy areas a lot are snail kites, because the marshy areas are full of kind of an aquatic snail, land snail, and the snail kite is his bill is hugely pointed down, curved down, and it's because he can reach. It allows him the bird to reach into the snail shell and pull the snail out, and then gulp it down. And so that's why they're called snail kites, because that's their main source of food. And lots of limpkins too. And limpkins eat snails too, even the ones in the US. And so Ewan decided he was going to go out and see if he could find some snail shells to take home, because he collects shells on his when he does trips like this. And I went, well, I collect shells too on my trips. So I had to go out there too and look for some snail shells. And I brought home 5 different types of different colors and sizes of snail shells. But you always had to be very careful around water, marshy areas especially. There's always caiman. If there's water, decent water, there's going to be caimans, and they can sneak up on you. They're not, really big, so they can kind of glide in unnoticed. And this was a ranch that we stayed at, and the lady, the owner, was crazy about flowers. Her whole front yard and backyard was full of all different kinds of flowering plants. And this is getting late in the evening, one of the days we were there, and that's Art taking a picture of the cactus flowers. And I had forgotten that cactus flowers, they normally bloom at night. And they were just beautiful, big flowers. They were quite showy. And speaking of sundown and everything, one really very British, Guyana used to be a British colony. One very British thing is to have a sundowner, which is you have a drink in the evening as the sun goes down. And we've done that in several countries. And our guide, Neil, had very thoughtfully brought a bottle of rum made in Guyana. And so we'd get our little toddy of rum each evening, and then head back to our lodge or wherever we were staying. So that's us holding our toddy glasses, and I've got the rum bottle in my hand, my right hand. So that was nice to watch the sun go down and drink it. And then the rum was good. And lots of really pretty sunsets in over different types of habitats while we were there, because we were out the door early. We were usually out the door at 4 or 5 in the morning, and we bird till dark. So I came back from the trip, and I think I slept for a week after I got home, because they were long days. And here we are at the end of the trip. This is the Lethem Airport, and we're waiting for our flight back to Georgetown. And that's Ewan on the left and me, and that's Neil, like I said, our Neil Allicott, our guide, and then Shane. And we were very pleased with our trip. And so we left nothing but footprints. We took nothing but pictures, and we killed nothing but time. So it was a great trip. And that's it.
Awesome. awesome presentation, Karen. Jealous of your trip. That was all really cool. So